3 presentations to take care of prior to the group photograph. To facilitate getting these done in a timely manner, I ask for your attention and to remain in position until we complete all items. Please feel free to finish your drinks and to offer personal congratulations to those you wish after all the presentations are complete. So to begin with, we have the privilege of being present for the attestation of a new member to the Canadian Armed Forces. I'm pleased to introduce to you Janice Wei-Yin Young. Janice? So, Janice requested to be sworn in at the dinner. She lives in Kamloops, attending Thompson Rivers University, where she's anticipating graduation with a Bachelor in Tourism Management degree in spring of 2015, coming up very soon. Her family and some close friends are in the Vancouver area, and she wanted to have them present. Present with Janice this evening are her father, Warren Young, her mother, Penny Chan, family friends, Mr. Rob Smith, Mrs. Cheryl Smith, and Miss Catherine Smith, who is a former member of 111 Squadron here in Vancouver. Janice, please come and join Janice over here. Janice already has a lengthy service with the cadet program, including graduating as a cadet from 111 Squadron in 2002, working continuously as an instructor with a number of cadet corps since 2002, including 2472 15th Field Royal Canadian Artillery, 2924 Rocky Mountain Rangers in Barrier, 2941 Rocky Mountain Rangers in Clearwater, 950 Rocky Mountain Rangers in Merritt, 2305 Rocky Mountain Rangers in Kamloops, where she will continue to volunteer after she's attested. She's also worked as a staff member at Vernon Army Cadet Summer Training Center in a variety of roles for 12 summers. I have personally had the privilege of working with her for a few of those summers. She will be attached to 137 Royal Canadian Sea Cadet Corps Kamloops following attestation, and she's joined tonight by that Corps' commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Bernice DeBert. Janice, do you wish to swear or affirm?
To swear.
Take the Bible in your right hand. Say aye and state your full name.
I, Janice Wei-Yin Young,
Do solemnly affirm, Start again. I, and state your full name.
I, Janice Wei-Yin Young,
Do swear
do swear
that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance.
that I
Will be faithful and bear true allegiance
will be faithful and bear true allegiance
to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II,
to Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II,
Queen of Canada.
Queen of Canada,
Her heirs and successors, her heirs and successors,
her heirs and successors,
according to law.
according to law,
So help me God.
so help me God.
Welcome to the Canadian Armed Forces and to the Cadet History. So it'll look interesting on video.
That's what
Certificate of Enrollment, Officer Cadet Janice Young has enrolled in the Canadian Forces. In making the formal commitment to serve Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, her heirs and successors as a member of the Canadian Forces, you have sworn to protect Canada and to defend Canadian interests and values at home and abroad. You further promise that you will demonstrate the qualities of integrity, loyalty, courage, honesty, fairness, and responsibility, putting service before self and personifying the attributes expected by the citizens of Canada whom you represent and who hereby put their trust in you. And this is a certificate for you. Now the formal part. Sign here. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention. informally, I said to Janice that she has a long history with the cadet program, and that is like the common law part of the relationship. She just went through the marriage ceremony, so. Anyway, thank you very much. I now call on Lieutenant Colonel,
can we just bring up the family in tight for a photo?
one right into the center. Janice, you go right in the center. There we go. I'll stand in that.
That's great. Okay, thank you. One more. Smile. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call on Lieutenant Colonel Dangus to make a presentation.
Good evening. How's everybody tonight? Good. Please bear with me. Officers, ladies and gentlemen, guests, good evening. The Canadian Forces Decoration was established by King George VI in 1949 and is by far the most recognizable honor worn by members of the Canadian Forces. Awarded for 12 years of long service and good conduct, the bestowal of the CD is one of the most important benchmarks in a military career. The CD has come to symbolize the devotion to duty and sacrifices that characterize life and service in Canada's military. It is a token of gratitude from Crown and Country for the loyalty, dedication, and professionalism consistently displayed by members of Her Majesty's Canadian Forces. Offering appropriate recognition to those who serve their country is important to every society around the world. Recognition for individual service and commitment is a key element of morale building in a military environment, one that fosters esprit de corps and creates role models for others to emulate. I think it's important for our branch to recognize the accomplishments of our members and to showcase the bestowal of this award. So I think it's most fitting for us to take the opportunity at this dinner, amongst peers and colleagues, to recognize one of our own for their service. At this time, I'd like to call forward Captain Tammy Hale. And I would just like to say that I'm honored and humbled to be recognizing the Crown and the country, if only they knew. But we'll move beyond that. Tammy enrolled in the Canadian Forces as an officer cadet in the Cadet Instructors Cadre Branch in 2002, employed with the 950 RCACC Cadet Corps in Merritt, BC. Her prior experience as a cadet in Merritt and at Vernon, and her work as a volunteer civilian instructor in Merritt and Prince George greatly influenced her passions to work with youth as a youth leader in the Canadian Forces Cadet Instructors Cadre Branch. Tammy received her commission to second lieutenant while serving at Merritt and performed the duties of administration officer, assistant training officer, and training officer. She has served as a team leader, course officer, and training officer at Vernon Cadet Training Center, and has had the opportunity to lead cadets on Army Cadet exchanges to Norway and Scotland. In 2005, Tammy transferred from Merritt to 3067 RCACC in Lillooet as the administration officer and was appointed as the commanding officer in May of 2006. She was promoted captain in January of 2009, and she's on her third concurrent term as the commanding officer of that cadet corps. Tammy has her Bachelor of Arts as a community and school support worker, and she's an education assistant in Lillooet. She's married to Robert Hale, who was a former lieutenant in the Cadet Instructors Cadre, and her children, Bobby and Alex, are members of 3067. Tammy earned her CD in June of 2014. Tammy, as I said, it's my honor and privilege to acknowledge the commitment and dedication you've made to the country and your community through your service and working within our branch, in the military, and with the cadets. Congratulations. Stand right here. Where's Ronald? Ronald. And I'm going to call upon Major Copan, if you can give me a hand, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, I now call upon Mrs. Louise Prowse and Major Roger Prowse of the Army Cadet League of Canada to make a presentation. This will be followed without further announcement immediately afterwards by a presentation by Captain Trevor Caldwell from the Navy League of Canada. Roger and Louise.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Lieutenant Colonel Copan, special guests, CIC, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, Louise and I have the pleasure of presenting an Army Cadet Service Medal to a very deserving and hardworking individual. I'll ask Francois Arsenault to come forward. Francois was a cadet with the 1955 RCACC in Calgary, Alberta, from June 1977 to June 1981, and aged out with the rank of cadet lieutenant after 4 years of service. But it didn't stop there. He has given back and continues to give back to the program tenfold. He has created and maintains the Army Cadet History website. He has produced countless videos of camp life at Vernon and other cadet camps around the country. He has worked very hard over the past couple of years to open a cadet camp museum at the Vernon Cadet Camp. If you get the opportunity to visit Vernon, make it a point to see this museum. It's fantastic. In his spare time, if he has any, he also is the zone chair for the Army Cadet League in BC for Okanagan. He has done a lot more for the cadet program than time will allow me to mention. As busy as he is, though, he always has time for his friends in the CIC. Congratulations, Francois.
That's a first. Thank you very much, Louise. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Pictures.
Okay. You missed that one, didn't you?
Yeah.
That's probably a good thing.
Just as well.
Play it straight for a change.
Very well.
No. That's better.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Trevor, please
Okay.
come forward.
Angus, Lieutenant Colonel Terry Copen, and Major Kathy Copen, please.
The skeletons are being exposed. We had this repressed.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Usually I do this to 15-year-olds, so please bear with me. But on behalf of the BCMG Navy League of Canada and the Sea Cadets, I believe this is long overdue, and I'd like to present each one of you with your 4-year Sea Cadet medal. For But as the Navy says, better late than never. There you go.
Thank you very much.
Ready, I ready, all in good time.
Ready, I ready. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, kind of late.
Thank you. PMC, head table guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Can everybody hear okay at the back?
What do you say? What?
That would be yes or no. It's my privilege to introduce our guest of honor and speaker for this evening, my friend Mark Macaulay. His formal biography is on your tables as previously announced by the PMC. I will complement that biography with some brief additional information and stories. It was by chance that Marv and I met more than 30 years ago. As an RCMP member, I was participating in the conduct of a road check for drinking drivers on a very cold winter night in Fort St. John. One of the many cars I checked contained a very jovial and intoxicated Canadian Forces lieutenant of the pilot variety, namely Marv. So at this point, you may be wondering, how did they become friends when Marv was intoxicated at a police road check? The answer is, Marv was the front seat passenger. And his first officer, a sober captain, was the driver. As a lieutenant, Marv was the aircraft commander of a 442 Squadron Buffalo, and his first officer was a captain. I guess it was a secondary duty for the captain to be the driver for the lieutenant.
Yes, it was.
And that was my first introduction to the difference between the Army and the Air Force. So it was a friendly first meeting that required no police intervention. A long story short, every time Marv came to Fort St. John for training exercises and searches for missing aircraft, and there were a lot in those days, we got together for a visit and became friends. When Marv was transferred to Edmonton, he became the cadet liaison officer for the Fort St. John Army Cadet Corps when I was commanding officer. He arranged a visit for the Corps to CFB Edmonton, including a tour of the service detention barracks, jumping out of the mock tower at the Canadian Airborne Training Center. Marv was now flying Hercs, and he signed out the $20+ million aircraft to take the cadets for a flight. Rules to the wind, I stood behind the pilot's seat as he executed a maximum effort takeoff. The flight took us into the mountains around Jasper as Marv demonstrated contour flying with the throttles pushed forward. Suffice it to say, it was rough. Partway through the flight, I hear the loadmaster over the headset saying to Marv, "Yeah, sir, you may want to slow her down a bit and take her up a bit. There's cadets puking back here." So Marv took the Herc up higher and pulled back on the throttles a bit to smoothen things out. I go into the back to check on the cadets. There were very few sitting up. Almost all were splayed across the webbed seats with the requisite air sickness bag in use. When we landed, I watched the line of disheveled cadets disembarking from the Herc, most carrying a full vomit bag. One cadet had 2 full bags, and I doubt he pursued an aviation career.
Kind of
I
recommend
managed
the
not to
Rocky
use a
Mountain
bag,
Ranger.
but just barely. In 1993, Lieutenant Colonel Dangus and I were put in a penalty box, meaning suspended from the CIC, for breaking rules because we were serving in the Canadian Forces while also being members of the RCMP. I was lamenting the situation via telephone to Marv, which at that time seemed hopeless to resolve for a CIC captain and lieutenant. Marv said to me, "Well, you know what you have to do?" I replied, "No." Marv says, "You have to write a service paper." I replied, "That's a good idea." I had no idea what a service paper was, and after the call ended, I went straight around the corner to the admin cabinet in the cadet office and looked up service paper in the military writing manual. The suggestion to create a service paper served as the foundation for the formal changes to the Queen's Regulations and orders that were realized some 5 years later. Thank you for that advice, Marv. It worked.
My pleasure.
There are, of course,
Thank God
many
I
other
didn't have to write
stories
the
I could
paper.
tell, but I would like to read you some excerpts from a book written by Robert Mason Lee titled Death and Deliverance. When I read this book, I knew the author had conducted extensive research, as he captures Marvin's character and behaviors exceptionally well. So from the back cover of the book, on October 30th, 1991, a Canadian Charlie 130 Hercules military aircraft en route to the top secret listening post at Alert crashed in the most isolated habitat in the world, the last ice-blasted spit of land before the North Pole. Miraculously, the crash itself killed only 4 of the 18 people on board. But the survivors, grievously injured, could not last long in the deadly cold. The crash of Box Top 22 was the first major air disaster ever to confront Canadian Forces Search and Rescue. A major air disaster is classified as an airliner down with more than 10 people on board. In military abbreviation, the situation is called a MAJ. So this moves forward in the book. Arnie answered the phone. It was his little brother. I don't know what the hell's going on, said Marv McCauley, but there's a plane down. You better get all the boys out. That was one of the good things about life in the military. In what one of their colleagues, with a wink, called an extraordinary coincidence, Arnie had spent the last 10 years on postings with his brother. In Greenwood, their 2 families lived a block apart. 5 years Arnie's junior, Marv was the more explosive of the 2, and even bigger, with a thick mustache and a 6-acre voice. Despite his bluster, though, he felt perpetually in Arnie's shadow. Arnie was golden. Arnie had so much ability that Marv never felt he was even playing on the same field. Marv was under a hockey suspension for his habit of losing his temper and dropping the gloves. Arnie was more the type to take the cheap shot without retaliation than score while the other guy was in the penalty box. Marv held Arnie up to a standard, which is probably why he followed his older brother through air cadets and basic training into rescue work. A pilot, Marv had risen to the rank of major. He outranked his older brother and was flight leader for the Hercules aircraft out of Greenwood. Arnie led the Sartecs, Marv led the Starbirds. They worked under the same commanding officer. They were a good team. Indeed, they had won national exercises, proving they were the best team in the country. They proved themselves to the world, but Marv had yet to prove himself, to cease seeing himself as Arnie's little brother. At that moment, Marv felt he'd been at the center of a monumental screw-up yet again. The base operations officer in Greenwood had telephoned him with breathless news about a big plane crash and asked him to hold while he was patched through to the rescue center in Halifax. The officer didn't stay on the connection and the line went dead. Marv had tried a Watts line, but it was busy. He nearly drove a thick finger through the telephone dial, raising Greenwood Air Base telephone operator. The operator didn't have the number for the Halifax Rescue Center. Marv had wondered aloud, employing several Saxon euphemisms, why this was so. He slammed down the receiver, then called Arnie, then raised the duty officer again. Finally, he got through to Halifax and learned the scan details. Hercules down near alert, 18 souls on board. Marv told the duty officer he wanted 100 extra flares on the standby Herc pronto and an upload of 63,000 pounds of fuel. 100 flares weighs 2,500 pounds. With the additional fuel, Marv's Hercules would be 4,000 pounds over maximum allowed weight at takeoff. You'll need Air Transport Group headquarters to approve that, he was told. Screw headquarters, Marv replied. Those are peacetime rules. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Captain Marv McCauley.
Madam PMC, Madam Vice, it's a good thing you stood up there for the loyal toast because I was going to call you Mr. Vice. Lieutenant Colonel Copan, head table guests, members of the Navy, Army, and Air Cadet Leagues of British Columbia, Canadian Forces officers, and our newest officer, CI, civilian volunteers, ladies and gentlemen. Well, indeed, it's a great pleasure to be here. I must admit, that was a long time ago, Box Top 22, and I haven't dined out on that very much. My older brother has done very well by dinners on Box Top 22, but to be perfectly honest, this is the first time I speak about it. And before I get into that, though, I wanted to pay special attention to one officer here who has made my presence here tonight available. About a year ago, Captain Paul Dacier and his wife produced a beautiful young daughter, and Paul took 9 months off in paternity leave, and he's just requalifying as a flying instructor back in Moose Jaw. And the government was good enough to give us an airplane to fly out here this weekend. So, Paul, thank you very much for helping us out. That's quite an introduction that Colonel Copan has given me, and it's kind of hard to believe it's been 30 years. And like Paul Harvey says, that's not the whole story, eh? I'm going to give you the other half of the story now. So, yes, indeed, I was a lieutenant. The captain was driving me. In fact, that captain now is a 767 captain with Air Canada, based here in Vancouver. And he's done very, very well for himself. I think what happened at that check stop is that I asked the RCMP constable in as sober a voice as I could muster at the time, as I said, we're going to go flying tomorrow. Would you like to come along with us? Colonel Copan said, yes, I would like to come with you guys. And we were in Fort St. John doing some spotter training. So this was above board. We were taking people flying, teaching them how to spot out at the back of the airplane. Well, I'm sure that everybody knows about 50 Shades of Grey, is in the theater and the book's a bestseller. I want to tell you about 50 Shades of Green, and that's what color he was. I think it's interesting that we did manage to get it back up to Fort St. John with a fair amount of regularity, and we would roll in on search. We'd work all day, and then normally when we were done for the day, the crew would get together, we'd button up the airplane, we'd come into town, we usually get a 2-4 beer, order a couple of pizzas, and we'd go to the hotel room, we'd debrief what we did that day and get ready to go the next day. Colonel Copan became quite a regular attendee at these crew debriefs. And in fact, often it directed our attention to proper places in Fort St. John that might be of interest to a on-the-road Air Force crew. I found it particularly interesting after, I don't know, I guess we were probably up there in Sartrask, we were up there for a good week, that I found out that indeed Colonel Copan was married. I thought he was just a single, he was a poor RCMP constable from Yorkton, Saskatchewan, stuck in Fort St. John looking for a little companionship. And so to Major Copan, my apologies for dragging your husband away from his police duties and onto recreational activities with Air Force boys on the road. I think it's important that we investigate the tour to Edmonton as well. And the mock tower at CIBC. No, and the best thing is that all those little 2276 Army cadets, a little 13-year-old girl, she's in her harness, got her hard hat on, and she's walking up the mock tower to jump out and go down the slides to the recovery area. And of course, the CO of the Army Cadet Corps, the Rocky Mountain Rangers, he's up there. He's going to be the first guy out of the mock tower. And anyway, steps to the door, and that mock tower is built at the right psychological height, that if you have any kinds of fear or intimidation of heights, you're not going to step out. Well, at the time, Captain Copan wouldn't go. So I don't know if he was an MWO or if he was a warrant officer. Anyway, the guy leaned over and said to the captain in a low growly voice, he says, "Listen, Captain, if you don't go out, none of these kids are going to go. So I'm going to give you a little help." So you and that's what it was, a boom. Anyway, it worked.
Did it once.
I think I got a picture of you, and I think that maybe you should.
Picture of you too. Your eyes were closed.
Yeah, but I wasn't screaming like a girl when I went. Anyway. And Lieutenant Colonel Dingus, I told you earlier, I expect to see you in a naval uniform next day, because this guy can't figure out what service he's in. Anyway,
Which one pays the best?
unfortunately, it's all the same, isn't it?
I'm learning that.
Anyway, I have taken, that's too much time. I think I just really want to talk about the importance of the program that you're all a big part of. And, you know, certainly for me, and I think that each and every one of us in here have been part of the program, whether Army, Air, or Sea Cadets. The program is a institution that gives young men and women an opportunity to take positions of responsibility and leadership at a young age, where a lot of other youth organizations don't allow the same opportunity. I think that for me, what I learned through my 5 years in Air Cadets allowed me to move forward in my life. I think the other thing that I would really like to say is that siblings are an important part of what each and every one of us needs in this world. And I know that my older brother was a big influence on me. You know, when he left high school, he was offered an ROTP scholarship to go to civilian university. He thought that was beneath him, and he joined the Army. I thought, like, I'd go to university if I was you, you know, like that would be a good gig. But Arnie, he joined the Army, did a tour with 1 PPCLI in Calgary, joined the Airborne Regiment, and then became a search and rescue technician. So whatever he did in life, he excelled at. And in the big scheme of things, he ended up being a chief warrant officer when he retired. And quite honestly, I think my older brother would have been a good general officer when he retired, because he had all the attributes that were required of being a good senior officer. I think that for him, the cadet program was a great start, and he excelled at the cadet program. He joined the militia as he was leaving high school, and I think that that just further fostered his ability to work into the Canadian Forces. And yeah, we did follow each other around for a decade. When I finished pilot training, he had already trained as a search and rescue technician. And when I got posted to Comox, I was still a single rat at the time. And that's who I lived with when I moved out to Comox, was my older brother and his family. So he was a good mentor for me. I can remember the first time I was actually checked out on standby. In those days, there was no cell phones. We had pagers. And him and another SARTEC, they had ordered a truckload of wood. We were bucking wood in his front yard. And the pager went off. And I got all excited, and I ran into the house to make the phone call to the base operator and said, this is the standby first officer on the Buffalo. Have we been launched? And she said, no, but your brother says to go out there and split that other cord of wood for him. Sometimes being too close is not a good thing either, you know. But I followed Arnie to Edmonton. He went to the survival school. He was promoted to sergeant, went to the survival school as a survival instructor. I went to 435 Squadron. And then from that survival school, he went to 413 Squadron as a warrant officer in charge of the SARTEC section. And in fact, he got me the job as the Hercules flight commander in 413 Squadron. They were switching from the de Havilland Buffalo to the C-130 as the main fixed-wing platform for the squadron, and they were moving the squadron from Summerside to Greenwood. So he's at a section heads meeting with the CO, the squadron ops officer, the Buff flight commander, lab flight commander, Samio, and they had made the announcement. So and he's in there as a SARTEC leader, and they're going, well, we're going to get rid of the Buffaloes. We're bringing in the C-130. Anybody know anybody who can fly the C-130 who's got some search and rescue background? Everybody's kind of looking around the room saying, well, not really. And it was my brother at the end of the table said, I got the guy for you. Now, that was awfully nice of him to do that for me. But no, I'll just leave it at that. That was good. Anyway, we ended up in Greenwood together and working for the same CO. I'll just leave that CO out of the story. I just, Well, when I got the first career manager interview I had after I got to Greenwood, I had never thought about being promoted to major. I just did my job, and then all of a sudden it kind of fell into my lap. And so I would go see the career manager. He calls me and he says, "Yep, you got a real good future in front of you, Marv. I'm 31 years old. I'm a major in the Air Force." He said, "You're going to do 2 or 3 years here in Greenwood. We're going to send you on a language course, and then we're going to send you to staff college, and then we're going to get you a squadron." And I'm kind of sitting back thinking, like, I didn't really ever think about getting a squadron. Like, that's moving pretty fast. Anyway, that CO that we ended up working for, inside of a year, out of 450 majors in the Air Force, I was the anchor man. I was at the very bottom of the merit list. So that was after that accident, too. So anyway, I still think the bottom major on the merit list ought to be able to wear a little anchor on his thing. He's holding the whole list down, you know, like that. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about Box Top 22. And I will be honest, it's been a while for me. I was telling the colonel before I got up to speak that I do have all the operational reports that have all the timings and when things happened and when they didn't happen. And when I got asked to speak, I went to look for those things and I couldn't find them. So I did the next best thing. I went and grabbed the Reader's Digest, June 1993 edition, and I read up what we did. So actually on that tour in 413 Squadron, I got into the Reader's Digest twice. So, but one was for Box Top, another one for a guy that ditched an airplane out at sea 200 miles off of Gander. What I will say about the book is that Robert Mason Lee did a very good job of describing what we did. I can't speak to what the survivors or to the SARTECs on the ground, but describing what we did in the airplane, he did a very good job of that. He's very thorough, and you know what I'll tell you tonight is probably not as good as you reading the book for yourself, but I'll give it a go. Starting with the launch, I never slept in the afternoons coming on to standby. Basically, a standby crew in those days, we would start at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, pick up a 2-hour call, which we'd hold until 8 o'clock in the morning, and then we'd go on 30-minute alert the following day. But that afternoon, they call that a slash day when you're starting at 4 o'clock. I had gone into the squadron that morning. I come home at noon hour. The kids were home from school, and when they went back to school, I actually went to bed on that day, which was pretty unusual for me. And got up about 5 o'clock, had supper with the family, and then when the phone went, Bobby Kern, who was a snowbird coordinator and I knew from Moose Jaw, was the RCC controller in Halifax. And he did use the word Mage Aid, and which is, for a SAR guy, is a big thing. Like it's a no-duff emergency of a gargantuan proportion. Our response from the squadron was to muster as many search and rescue technicians as we could and as much equipment as we can, and we're going to get that first airplane going inside the 2 hours. I don't remember talking about peacetime rules and stuff like that, to be perfectly honest. That would be slightly insubordinate, I would think, but and you know me, I'm not that. But I was flying with some really good people. Major Randy Price was the squadron operations officer. In fact, he became Colonel Price, the wing commander in Comox there for a little while. Bill Surr was the engineer. Mark Fav, an excellent navigator that I'd worked with in Edmonton, and he followed me to Greenwood. Chuck Coots and Jimmy Norris were the load masters. And then out of a 21-man SARTEC section, I had 14 of them on board my airplane that night. So we had 2/3 of the SARTECs from Greenwood, Nova Scotia, in the back end of my airplane. So we took off. If you look at where Alert is 7 hours directly north of Greenwood. It's at about 63 degrees west. We're at 65 degrees west, from 44 to 82 degrees north. So for us, it was 7 hours of listening to HF frequencies and trying to figure out what was going on. Information was not very good. We didn't really know what we were getting into. And when we got there, the Edmonton Herc had already come in. Jim Berger, he had landed in Alert. And Randy was flying the airplane. He was my first officer, but in those days we would swap seats. So I was the aircraft commander of the airplane, but I was flying in the right seat working at radios, and Randy was flying in the left seat. So we went to drop a flare to see if we could illuminate the area over the crash site. We had an emergency locator going on, so we knew where the crash site was, and we had a radial DME from the nav facility in Alert, so we knew where we were working. And our procedure at night was to drop this flare from about 5,500 feet above ground, and then the object was to circle the flare as it descended underneath the parachute, and hopefully when it got through the bottom of clouds, so would we, and we'd see the ground, and we'd find what we were looking for. Well, Randy, a bit of a gung-ho pilot, and he's flying the airplane, so we're in cloud, and we throw this 1 million candle power flare out. It lights, and it's got like carbon arc lighting. It's got that orangey, pinky glow. And in cloud, it illuminates everything. It's like you're flying around in a pinky orange can of paint. And so I'm asking, the flare's somewhere over to the left, and I'm asking Randy, do you see the flare? Because, you know, this thing's a magnesium flare, weighs about 25 or 30 pounds, and the last thing you want to be doing is flying into this thing, because we got an airplane wing full of fuel here, and that magnesium is going to go right through the aluminum, and they'll be looking for 2 Hercs. So anyway, Randy says, yeah, I think I got it. And so now we're descending, and we're looking, and I still don't see the flare. And all of a sudden, the flare's on the nose, eh? And I'm thinking like, anyway, Randy avoided the flare, which was good. But we tried it twice. You think after the first time we would have just said to forget it. And that's in fact what we ended up doing. So Alert was full of C-130s. We couldn't go there, so we had to turn around. We flew 2 hours south to Thule, Greenland. So of course, when we get to Thule, Greenland, I'm trying to get a crew of 21 guys to bed, basically, is what I'm doing now. And I'm thinking, we knew that the vehicles were going across the snow, and they were going to try to reach the crash site by ground. So I'm kind of figuring we're going to go to bed, and should I tell them about the beer or not? I'm going to tell them about the beer. Privileged platform. Randy, Mark, and I, the 3 officers on the crew, we got all the Sartex, and the rest of the crew all looked after. We went and bought a 6-pack of beer, and we sat down. We each had a couple of beers, and we figured, well, you know, we gave it a good shot. I guess the rescue will be over after we get up, and away we go. So we had our 2 beers. We went to bed, and wake up in about 3 or 4 hours. I get up, turn on the TV. CNN's on in Thule, of course. The Americans got all that stuff going on, and they're saying now, big Arctic blizzard. It's really blowing up there now, and they still haven't got to the crash site. So I'm thinking like, holy cow, phone rings. Says, hey, you guys, get your crew up, you're going back in. I figured that was a bad time to tell them that I'd had a couple beers 3 hours ago. So I said, okay, we'll be right there. So we got the guys up, and we got back into the airplane, and we took off out of Thule. Now, Thule's a special place. It's about 3/4 of the way up Greenland on the west coast, and it's got a great big runway. But to prevent any permafrost damage or damage from the permafrost, they actually paint the runway white. It's painted completely white, and it's got red markings on it. And that's so that the sun, when it's up 24 hours a day, doesn't melt the permafrost below it. So it's not such an easy thing to see in the middle of a snowstorm, but it prevents overheating in the summertime. One of the things that the paint on the runway does is it makes it very slippery. So it has a friction index slightly less than what normal pavement would have. Well, as it turned out, there was a howling crosswind that night, and I thought that to myself, like, gee whiz, you know, this is not very good, and maybe we should be checking the crosswind limits. Of course, the first officer I'm working with, Randy Price, and he's saying, you know, damn, we don't care what the crosswind limits are, we're going. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, okay, let's go. So we line the airplane up and we start rolling down the runway, and then all of a sudden the airplane starts to drift, and it's drifting off the runway. And I'm thinking, well, I've got the aileron in, I've got the rudder input in, and it's not correcting the drift. We're actually going off the runway. So I got an airplane that weighs, I don't know, 75 or 77 tons. It's doing about 130 knots, and I'm going to go off into the rhubarb is what we like to call it. And so anyway, the only thing I could think of is to asymmetrically adjust the power on the airplane to stop that airplane from drifting off the runway. So I actually pulled the throttle back on the outboard engine on the left wing, and the asymmetric thrust actually brought the airplane back onto the runway. Of course, that got the engineer pretty excited when he seen the torque falling off on the #1 engine. And he's calling it now. And Randy's in the other seat. I'm in the left seat at this time. Randy's in the right seat. He's kind of going, do you want to abort? I said, no, we're not aborting. We're going flying. So we get the airplane off the runway, and we get safely airborne. We're cleaning up the airplane. And just the way the topography is around there, there's some potential for some pretty solid turbulence. And to be perfectly honest, it's the worst hit of turbulence I've ever had in my whole aviation career. And we got to about 600 feet, and in a second or two, we're at 500 feet. And then we continue to climb up. I guess the Sartecs in the back, they're all floating around like the old vomit comet, eh? And but listen, when it stopped, they all hit the ground with a fair amount of force. Anyway, we went back up to alert, and basically what we were doing is we were flying top cover for 2 go-track vehicles, which are Bombardier skis and tracks that were trying to take another route to get to the crash site. So what we would do is we would, because they had about 40 feet visibility on the ground in this storm, what we would do is we could look through the storm and see them on the ground. I mean, we saw them the whole night. So what we would do is they would ask for a flare over Mushroom Point, for example, because they're trying to get to the Sheridan River Delta to go up into the hills to go to the crash site. So we would go over Mushroom Point, we'd throw out a flare. He said, you see the flare? That's over Mushroom Point. So drive in that direction. About every 15 or 20 minutes, we'd leave the go tracks, and then we would try to go back inland to go to the crash site and see if we could actually spot the wreckage and get ready to do the insertion of the Sartec team. Anyway, one of the times there, Fred Ritchie was in the go track vehicle, and he says, hey, Rescue 305, where are you guys? I said, well, we're actually working over the crash site right now. Yeah, he says, I see flares, but they're in our rear window. I said, stop where you are right now, Fred, because I'm going to come back to you. So we go back and find these go-track vehicles. And somewhere in that Arctic night, those guys had actually, instead of traveling along the coastline, had made a 90-degree left turn, and they're driving right out onto the Arctic Ocean ice. And about a quarter mile ahead of them, there's an open lead there. And those things weigh about 9,000 pounds apiece, so we were going to lose both those guys. So we got them turned around, and we got them going back in the right direction. Anyway, well, I should have told you that first mission that we flew. So we launched, got the call around 7 o'clock. We launched just before 9 o'clock on the night of the accident. The airplane had been lost at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so we were airborne about 5 hours after the accident. Took us 7 hours to get there, flew around for about an hour, 2 hours back to alert, or Thule from alert. So we flew about 11 hours that first night, 2 beers and about 5 hours of sleep, and back in the breach again. And the next night we flew another 11 hours. Well, it's night all the time up there, so it's hard to say. Anyway, we, probably about 6 hours into our escorting these 2 over snow vehicles, we finally found the crash site. Jerry Domney was the jump master, and he positioned himself at a paraglass door, or the SAR door that goes in place of the para door in the back, and he finally found the crash site. So our night operating procedures are, we normally would drop a couple of target marking lights, which are just small canisters with small parachute. They fall for 1,500 feet, open at the last minute, and then they settle down on the ground. And hopefully what you end up with is a target with a light at the target. So now you're actually jumping to a light on the ground. And anyway, that didn't work with a dam, because it was blowing about 35 knots in the ground. So even though the lights hit the ground, they were gone right away. So we had been dropping a lot of flares over there, so we had a pretty good idea what the drift line was. So I guess we agreed. I don't know, I think I was pretty much told by my older brother what was going to happen, but we agreed that we were going to try to do an insertion of 6 guys followed by 5 guys. Our night drop procedure is not dissimilar to what we were doing on the first night when we got there. But when we drop search and rescue technicians at night, they are always illuminated. So there'll be a certain amount of illumination for them to be able to see to land. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to get a flare out first, do a pattern down, and then drop the SARTEX out. We couldn't do it from 2,000 feet, which is our normal night drop altitude, because we'd be in cloud. We had to get down to 1,000 feet above ground. And one of the problems we had is that we normally have to have the jumpers out the door inside of 3 minutes of the flare illumination, because they're only 5-minute flares. So the first time we went around, we didn't get to the exit point for the jumpers in time, and we had to call a stop drop. I wasn't thinking that we were 1,000 feet lower, so they didn't need two minutes of flare burn. They probably only needed 1 minute of flare burn. Anyway, I got told by the chief in no uncertain terms that there's not going to be no more stop drops. We're going to go try that again, and we ended up doing it again, and we ended up putting the first 6 guys in. And I'll tell you, there was one thing. I didn't know where my brother was in the stick of 6 jumpers, but I knew he was going to be in that first stick. And it was the first time in my life that we dispatched search and rescue technicians without having a plan for recovering them. We had no idea how we were going to get them out of there. So they're my responsibility. And, I was thinking about that, crossed my mind. And the thing is that I also crossed my mind is that if I lost my older brother on this, I'm going to have some big explaining to do to his family, his wife, and I'll probably have to answer to my mom and dad too. So I've never had a nervous twitch in my life, but I had one that night. And I had this part of my lip flapping around so much I thought she was going to come right off. But anyway, he got on the radio as soon as they landed. He said, there's a good place for the guys to land. Everybody was hurt on that original group of 6, but they were all minor injuries. The guys were able to get up and do their job. We sent 5 more guys down, and then we were going to dispatch the survival equipment that these search and rescue technicians carry. But we were running low on fuel. In fact, we got to a situation where we couldn't fly to Thule anymore because we didn't have enough gas to get there. So we said we're going to do one pass. We're going to throw all the survival equipment out in a big cargo net with a couple of 24-foot canopies on it, and we put as many chem lights as we could find on there and strobes so the guys would be able to find this stuff. And as it turned out, we dropped it. We flew by. We got the radio call from the ground, said, "When's that survival equipment coming?" And I'm thinking, like, okay, who's going to tell them that we've already sent it? Because they never got it. And And in fact, they never recovered that equipment that night at all. So anyway, we were at the point where we couldn't do anything more. I'd inserted 11 SAR-techs into the crash site. They were doing their triage and doing what they do when they get on the ground. And the only thing that was left for us to do was to recover the airplane in alert. So that's what we did. The 3 SAR-techs that remained on my airplane, they got off. They went to the Edmonton airplane that was flashing up. And those 3 SAR-techs jumped into the crash site that night as well. The 2 GO tracks that had another 7 or 8 SAR-techs on it, they made it to the crash site after we had recovered in alert. And in total, I think there was 21 or 22 SAR-techs that had made it to that crash site that night. And when you consider the trade only had about 115 or 120 SAR-techs in all of Canada, they did some pretty amazing work that night. As it turned out, there was 18 people on that airplane. Four died in the accident, and John Couch was a friend of mine. He passed away from exposure sometime in the 32 hours before the search and rescue technicians got there. For some of you, it's especially some of you younger ones, this stuff happened before you were even a gleam in your dad's eye, and you probably don't remember it. For some of other people, it's probably a couple nights we'd like to forget, and you know, we're quite thankful for the people that made it out of there. I'm proud to have participated in that, but when you take a look at the whole operation, we were a pretty small cog in a very, very big operation, and we were lucky to be part of it. It's 40 hours of my life that I don't want to live again, and the job that I'm doing now, hopefully I won't have to. Paul, if we're going home tomorrow, let's keep it safe, and that's about it. So I'm not gonna. I've talked probably longer than I should have, and I apologize for that. You guys are probably all itching to go have a good time. Okay, thank you, Paul. It's time to sum up. Anyway, I really want to say thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here. It's very, very nice to watch you people at a mess dinner. The decorum has been very, very good. I was telling Colonel Copan earlier tonight that I had attended, the last mess dinner I attended was my niece's graduation mess dinner in Portage la Prairie. And I was quite frankly ashamed of the way that people acted at that dinner, and I kind of vowed I wouldn't go to another one. So I'm glad I did go to another one, and one that is being run with a certain amount of history and pomp and circumstance the way that it should be run. So I congratulate you all for being here. I congratulate you for the job that you're doing, and I'd like to thank you very much for having me. Thanks for words.
Captain McCauley, head table guests, members of the leagues, colleagues who delivered the cadet program, friends. It's my pleasure to bring you greetings from our commanding officer, Andy Muir. Commander Muir regrets he couldn't be here tonight and sends his best wishes to all. He says, I thank you for your efforts and dedication to this fine program. Spring break is upon us with multiple fun and exciting opportunities for cadets. This includes orcas at sea with cadets from across the country, sailing and seamanship training in Esquimalt, spring concentration in Vernon with marksmanship, music and pre-para, gliding in Comox and Port Alberni, silver expeditions, and honor band performances in Victoria, Nanaimo, Burnaby, and Vernon. All in all, a busy time. Couldn't happen without all of you. Be safe, and thanks. I also bring warm regards from the CIC branch Colonel Commandant, Major General Paul Hussey. I acknowledge all those who traveled to be here tonight. If my calculations are correct, the ones who traveled the furthest are Captain Marv McCauley and Paul Dossier, both from Saskatchewan. But of course, they had an Air Force plane, so.
We're burning your fuel.
Colonel Purcell, please accept our collective gratitude for sharing the regiment's home with our branch. Brent, please accept please pass our appreciation to your adjutant, ops warrant, and duty officer for their assistance.
Nice.
I offer my appreciation to the other committee members, Major Kathy Copan, Major Dave Timms, and Captain Angela Sargent, who have organized this dinner for you, as well as those who helped with setup today. Finally, I express appreciation to Captain Marv McCauley for being our guest of honor and speaker. I can tell you that there's a great deal of humility in what he was saying tonight. I'm sure that you would know that. And they did a hell of a lot more than he's letting on, all of them. Marv, your words tonight are appreciated. Your actions and those of your colleagues are, well, each of us knows what those actions represent. And we could each create a long list which would contain the most favorable character qualities and revered descriptors. I don't imagine that many, outside of war, have had to deal with the level of life and death responsibilities and decision making that you encountered in 1991 as aircraft commander. We admire you and your colleagues as being among the best of Canadians. I'm proud to be your friend. The CIC Colonel Commandant and Branch Advisor have special coins for recognition. The coin's obverse depicts the branch badge surrounded by colors from our flag, and the reverse has the words CIC Branch Excellence along with the branch motto. Marv, on behalf of all present tonight, this coin is presented as a small token of our appreciation. Please consider this coin a symbol of your ongoing affiliation to our branch family.
Oh, that's really nice. Thank you very much, Terry.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate
I
it.
think we got to get a photo here.
Okay. That gonna work?
Perfect.
Thank you very much. Very nice.
I now ask Mrs. Christine Welsh, First Vice President, BC Provincial Committee, the Air Cadet League of Canada, to come forward.
Thank you. Captain McCauley, it states in your biography that you were an air cadet at 15 Squadron in Medicine Hat for 5 years back in the 1970s. In that 5 years, you received several summer camps, including scholarship camps for senior leaders, glider pilot, and power pilot scholarship, which you turned down to join the Canadian Forces as an officer cadet. After reading your biography, it's truly apparent that you have a passion for aviation and have been fortunate enough to have a career in the industry that you love. Not many people are able to do that. You've served not only our country as an officer in the Canadian Armed Forces, and thank you, by the way, but as an officer in the Cadet Instructors Cadre, which you are still involved in today. As you are aware, cadets that spend a minimum of 4 years in the Air Cadet program may apply to the Air Cadet League of Canada's Air Cadet Long Service Medal. And each year they can receive a bar or rosette to apply to their medal and ribbon. I don't believe you've had the honor of receiving your Air Cadet Long Service Medal.
I have not.
So on behalf of Keith Mann, the National President of the Air Cadet League of Canada,
He's a good man.
and Mr. Ron Reid, the British Columbia Provincial Committee of the Air Cadet League of Canada, it is my honor and privilege to present you with your Long Service Medal and rosette for your service. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. That's very, very nice. Please, let's get a picture of this one. How's that look? Good? Good, yeah. Thank you so much. Very, very nice. Thank you. Got the bag and everything. Holy cow. Well, isn't that nice? Terrence here, Rod.
Nice, eh?
Beautiful.